Hey guys, Rick Stone here. Welcome to our Friday gardening tip, and this is another in our gardening series and our monthly planting guides. And so we're talking today about things that you can plant in February if you live in zones 5 and 6. Now, if you don't know what gardening zone you live in, please look down below. There's a link in the description that will take you to our website, and that will get you connected up so that you can figure out what growing zone you actually live in. Okay, this video is intended for those that live in zones 5 and 6. If you live in zones 7 and 8 or 9 and 10, I have separate videos for you guys as well. You can click on the links that will come up above, or down in the description there's links that you can click on that will take you to those videos for February for the different gardening zones. Okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about zones 5 and 6. Relatively similar. You're going to be kind of the middle of the country for those of you that live in the United States. There are zones 5 and 6 in Canada as well. Your anticipated last frost date, if you live in zone 6, ought to be roughly May 1st. If you live in zone 5, you're probably looking about May 15th, okay? Now, don't hate on me too much, because I recognize that there's going to be a lot of variability in that depending on what your region is like, but that's kind of a target. So May 1st for zone 6, May 15th for zone 5. That's kind of your target. And so that date becomes very important, because the things that we're talking about planting today are all going to be seedlings that we're going to be planting indoors. We're not ready to plant outside yet in zones 5 and 6, but there are some seedlings that we can be growing indoors, and you want to target planting those in the garden because they're all cool season crops, and you want to be able to plant those in the garden about 4 to 6 weeks before that last frost date. So that means we need to be planting about 12 weeks before that frost date, that last frost date. Okay, so here we go. These are some of the seedlings that you can start in zones 5 and 6 in February. So if you live in zone 6, you're going to start these about mid-February. If you live in zone 5, you're going to start these towards the end of February. Okay, so first off is leafy greens. We've got a lot of leafy greens that you can be planting this time of month. We've got lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, kale, and then all of the different Asian greens. So things like bok choy and pak choy and minzoa, all of those can be planted inside in February. Okay. Then the other thing that we as gardeners in zones 5 and 6, and by the way, I live in zone 6, and so I'm pretty familiar with this. The other thing that you guys are going to be wanting to think about is the cole crops, so the broccoli family. All of those you can start indoors in the middle of February. So zone 6, middle of February, zone 5, end of February. So we're talking about things like broccoli, cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, collards, and cauliflower. Okay, all of those are going to need a solid 6 weeks indoors before they're ready to be transplanted out. And so, again, take your last frost date. So let's use zone 6 for example. Well, no, let's use zone 5. So if your last frost date is May 15th. Then you're going to want to plant those out about April 1st, which means you're going to be wanting to start them mid to late February inside so that they're ready to go out on April 1st. Okay? Now, I know, especially in zone 5, that there's still some pretty harsh weather in April. And so you need to consider what your zone 5 is like, because your zone 5 may be different than somebody else's zone 5. So again, kind of gauge that planting time, the seed starting planting time, based on what your environment is going to be like 6 weeks from now, and then away you go. And the other thing is, with all of these crops, one thing to keep in mind is you can plant them out in a cold frame or a hoop house or a greenhouse for sure in April, even if you live in zone 5, because the ground hopefully won't be frozen inside of those as well. So especially if you live in a zone 6, you're going to be able to plant things in February that can then go out in early April out into the garden. And those of you in zone 5, you're going to plant late in February so that it's going out mid to late April when things are just starting to warm up a little bit. Okay? All right, so that is our February planting guide for zones 5 and 6. Now, March, we're going to have a lot more coming up, a lot more that we'll have to do to plant. One thing that you should consider if you live in like a zone 6 is there are a few other things that you could possibly think about growing starting as seedlings indoors. And one of those would be tomatoes. Yeah, tomatoes. You could start some tomatoes in February that would be planted out sometime in April. But the only way you're going to be able to pull that off is if you have wall of waters. So if you use a wall of water to protect your tomato plants, or maybe even peppers, you could do peppers as well, you could definitely get those started in February, and then you're going to have those go out sometime in April. Okay, zone 5, you're probably going to have to bump that back a little bit more. Tomatoes, maybe the end of February, but probably more, the first part of March is when you're going to be getting those in. Another couple of things that you could consider if you're in zone 6, you can also still get onions and leeks planted, but early in the month. If you're late in the month when you're watching this video, it's too late for zone 6. If you're zone 5, then you should be able to get some onions planted inside, or leeks, and those will be ready to go out mid-April, or maybe even a little bit later than that into your garden. Okay, and then another one that you could consider is celery. Celery is actually pretty hardy, and it likes to be started indoors because it has such a long growing season. So you could get some celery started indoors as well for both zones 5 and zone 6 in February. Okay, all right, so that's all I have for you for this week. Make sure you check back next month. We'll have another growing guide for March for zones 5 and 6. And so that video will be available for you. And again, remember, if you're in zones 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, or even zones 3 and 4, I've got videos for you this month. So click on those. Those will be at the end screen, take you to the playlist where you can see those videos as well. Okay? All right. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And when you do, click that notification bell so that you get notice of when I have more videos come out, which we do several times a month. Lots of gardening videos, especially this time of year where we're doing a lot of planting guides. All right. That's what I have for you for the week. Everybody have a great week. Happy gardening.